We cross now to Matthew Cannock, who's head of office in Amnesty International Centre for International Justice via Skype from the Netherlands. Thank you very much indeed for joining us on the programme. Your reaction and your thoughts to the judgment today?
Well, to be honest, the judgment today was nothing that we weren't already expecting. The law was already fairly settled. It was a decision that was similarly passed in South Africa all the way up to the Supreme Court. And the ICC's decision was no different than some of the other decisions it's taken in similar cases. So to that end, no real joy in the ICC's decision, rather than lamenting the unfortunate and shameful actions of the South African government in not arresting Al-Bashir when he set foot in South Africa in 2015.
Your thoughts about the court saying that it was probably not useful to refer South Africa to the UN Security Council and to the United Nations?
To be honest, it was probably correct. The issue of Al-Bashir has been referred to the UN Security Council at least on 6 occasions, and frankly, nothing's happened. I think the court's opinion was essentially, look, the matter is moot in South Africa. They know there are international obligations. The matter is moot before the ICC because we've now quite clearly stated that South Africa infringed its obligation. We won't gain a lot from referring it to the UN Security Council, the Assembly of States parties, and frankly, it's up to the states now to come up with a mechanism which will ensure that when issues are referred to it, that they can take meaningful action. But they don't have that at the moment, so I can understand why the Chamber made the decision it did.
So international justice is something that you focus on. What's at stake here if state parties don't carry out acts or arrests on behalf of the ICC?
Well, the main thing that's at stake, frankly, is that all the victims of international crimes, particularly in this instance, the victims of the crimes allegedly committed by Omar Bashir, who look to the court for justice, lose that opportunity because states parties are not meeting their obligations. I think that, frankly, is the main thing that stands to be lost. Of course, it doesn't do the cause of international justice any favours if states flout their obligations like this. And in further instances, we see some states likely thinking that they can also get away with not meeting their obligations. We saw recently Jordan failed in its obligation to arrest Omar al-Bashir. So we really hope that the decision, frankly, will provide some clarity to all states parties, not just in Africa, not just South Africa, but to all states parties, what their obligations are and that they really have to meet them now.
Are you worried, though, that without a referral or some kind of sanction, that this might encourage some of those countries on the continent that were already thinking about withdrawing from the ICC, perhaps saying, look, you know, we don't have to stay. This body doesn't have much teeth anyway?
I can see why that would be a fear, yes, absolutely. But what we're really hoping is that the South African government, now having quite rightly in a bona fide manner gone before their domestic court system, gone before the international court system, will hold their hands up and say, yes, we absolutely acknowledge that we should have arrested President Omar al-Bashir, and that needs to be the message going forward. In this instance, I'm not sure that looking back a number of years and looking to sort of retroactively make an example of South Africa will be helpful in any way. And actually what we really need is for South Africa to retake its position at the front of those states parties who were so vocal in their support for the ICC, and to drive that forward as the court moves into much more politically difficult cases.
What do you say to the argument that, you know, whilst everybody wants to get Bashir arrested, that maybe there's a bigger picture that needs to be considered, i.e., if we have him at the table and discuss with him, better prospects for peace and resolution of some of the regional issues might happen. But if he's incarcerated, we could actually end up in a worse situation than with him inside jail.
Look, and I've heard those arguments made many times, and the peace and justice debate is one that will never go away, and maybe quite rightly so. I think as far as we're concerned, we would say that the lack of justice certainly would not lead to any long-term peace. In many respects, impunity creates the very environment in which these international crimes are thriving. It creates the very environment in which genocide takes place. So as far as Amnesty International is concerned, we're looking at a long-term picture.
All right, so what would you like to happen now as a final question?
I would quite like to see the International Criminal Court push on and open investigations outside of the African region. We know it may imminently do that in Afghanistan. We know it has opened a number of preliminary examinations into Iraq, for example, into Palestine, outside the African region. I think it's very important now that justice is made available to victims of international crimes all over the world, and not just within the African region, as it may have been for now.
All right, and that's where we're going to have to leave it. Thank you very much indeed for joining us and sharing your thoughts with us. That was Matthew Cannock, Head of Office, Amnesty International Centre for International Justice, talking to us via Skype from the Netherlands. Now,